his conversations with Dr. Meiji fell into the same pattern most of the time. It was nice communicating with him in person rather than solely over email. But no matter the topic, the two would talk so animatedly and extensively that their analysis was so complex and involved that they barely understood it, let alone anyone else. During one of their sessions, a grad student had walked into Meiji's office with a question. He had only listened for a few seconds, eyes wide until he scuttled away, claiming that he would be back later. Dr. Meiji noticed this as well. He was deep in thought one morning when he said, "Midoriya, I have a new challenge for you. I want you to start doing a brief analysis on the people close to you. Your strength lies in the way that you can discern so much about a person from idle observation, but that's not always practical. If you're helping a hero or the police force, they won't always have time to read a 20-page analysis. Your challenge is to make these no longer than a single page, but with all of the most important information." Izuku thought it over a minute before nodding. That makes sense. The professor smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "I have a class soon, and you've got patrol this evening with the police, don't you? You don't want to be late." They parted ways, and Izuku only paused at his room long enough to grab his EMT pack before running out to the waiting police car. It wasn't really necessary for patrol, but Izuku liked to carry it. It gave him peace of mind knowing that he was better prepared to help someone should the need arise. Between the EMT pack and the Don't Rape Me kit, Izuku felt prepared for whatever may come. He had no idea how wrong he was. The officers waiting for him were ones he'd met before. Mao was in his mid-20s with a quirk that made his teeth razor sharp, and his partner Aisha was cool-headed with a stamina enhancement quirk. Aisha reminded Izuku a little bit of Kondo, but his glare didn't have nearly the same impact as hers did. The two greeted Izuku as he climbed into the car, genuinely happy to see him. Aisha said, "You get to pick where we're patrolling tonight. We're extraneous, so we can patrol anywhere within our zone." Izuku thought of the news he'd been analyzing that very morning. He was sure the hero killer, Stain, was still in Hosu. The man likely didn't fight well against groups of people, so it would probably be safe enough to go. "Can we patrol this area of town?" Izuku asked, pointing to a specific area on the paper map Mao held. "It's a pretty quiet area, but whatever you want, Midoriya," Mao said. For whatever reason, Izuku felt a deep sense of foreboding, but it also came with the sense that someone needed his help. To distract himself, Izuku instead thought about his EMT pack. It would be too cumbersome to carry when he became a fully fledged police officer, but if he could compress it to, say, a fanny pack. Mao broke him from his ponderings. "We know how much you like heroes, so if you wanted to see him, we could probably catch Native on his patrol. This is his part of town. I would love to meet him. I have some questions about his quirk." Smiling fondly at the boy's excitement, Mao told Aisha to pull over. The three piled out of the car. They had been together for patrols the past few days, and the officers were growing ever fonder of the kid. Both found themselves shaking their heads at Izuku's insistence to bring his EMT pack. Mao raised an eyebrow. "I appreciate how prepared you're trying to be, Midoriya, but it seems just as excessive tonight as it has the other nights." "Well, I can't do much to help with police work until I finish at the academy, so I'll help this way," Izuku said brightly. Making sure his equipment was in place, Aisha said, "I was doubtful when I heard Tsukauchi's plan to make a teenager an officer, but now I see his reasoning. We're glad to have you, Midoriya." Izuku stammered an awkward thanks, but all three froze at the sound of a pained groan. Luckily, the police had been marginally successful in training Izuku not to run into potentially dangerous situations. Instead, it was a brisk walk. The kid very nearly managed to leave Mao and Aisha in his dust. "Call for backup," Izuku commanded before disappearing around the corner. "Should we?" Mao asked hesitantly. "Do what the kid says. I'm going to follow. You stay here unless you're needed. If it gets bad, pull Midoriya out. I don't want to explain to Tsukauchi how we let his son get murdered." Izuku had immediately made his way to native as quietly as possible. The whole scene was a mess. Just as he had thought, here was the hero killer Stain, but someone had distracted him from his prey. While native slowly bled out in the alleyway, Stain was busy injuring someone in silver armor. Izuku was fairly sure he had seen that same armor on one of the Class 1A students after the USJ incident, and the boy's resemblance to Ingenium was undeniable. So this was a revenge mission. But now was not the time to analyze motives and quirks. Izuku had to see to native's injuries. The hero was conscious, but paralyzed from Stain's quirk. Native hissed for him to leave, get pros, but if his injuries weren't seen to immediately, native would likely be permanently paralyzed like Ingenium. He needed an ambulance now. Izuku felt slightly guilty doing this, but he stuffed a wad of gauze into the man's mouth to hopefully shut him up. He felt when the hero killer's eyes fell on him. Chills ran down Izuku's spine, and his heart sank when he saw that the hero student was unmoving on the ground. His helmet was off, and Izuku recognized him from the sports festival. Now the resemblance to Ingenium was undeniable. The two were likely brothers. But Stain's eyes were on Izuku, and his sword dripped blood onto the pavement. The same blood that the hero student was losing too quickly. Hosu police. Put your weapon down, hero killer Stain. Aisha stalked into the alleyway, placing himself between Izuku and Stain, gun drawn. Ah, the public defenders that don't masquerade as heroes. I have no qualms with you, but I won't allow you to keep me from my prey, Stain said in a voice that sounded like the night itself. The hero killer sprang forward, nimbly avoiding the bullet Aisha shot. While the man was partially distracted, Izuku finished bandaging native as quickly as possible before scuttling over to the hero student, ripping open high EMT pack. What are you doing? Get out of here, this isn't your fight, the boy wheezed. It shouldn't be yours either, Izuku hissed, pressing gauze down onto the wound. He almost immediately felt blood soak through. You're training to be a hero, aren't you? I thought heroes were agents of protection, not revenge. Midoriya, get out of here, came a strangled cry. Aisha was collapsed on the ground, blood slowly staining his shirt. Izuku frantically searched the alleyway. Stain was. He managed to raise his EMT pack in front of him like a shield, a few daggers sinking into it. Stain was advancing, his sword glinting in the moonlight. Once his quirk wears off, press on that gauze, Izuku instructed the hero student before putting the "Don't Rape Me" whistle between his lips, blowing with the full capacity of his lungs. You test my patience, child. Stain growled, lunging forward. Izuku knew he couldn't even begin to match the man in martial arts. His technique really was a thing of beauty. He also knew that everyone who cared about him was going to hate this plan. But Stain's quirk required him to ingest his victim's blood, which meant that he had to get close to said victim for even a moment, which was when Izuku would strike. The sword sliced through the EMT pack like it was nothing, but Izuku managed to avoid the blade. He was still kneeling near the hero student, and he threw the remnants of the pack at the hero killer. You behave like a true hero, child. But don't hold back, I'm curious to see what manner of quirk you have. Stain chuckled darkly before bringing his sword down in a wicked arc. Izuku cried out as it was buried in his thigh, but now was his time. One hand lashed out, desperately grabbing the blade and pulling, causing the hero killer to stumble closer. Spitting out the whistle, Izuku said, I don't have one, before using his other hand to whip out the taser, pressing it to the soft skin of the hero killer's neck. The sheer power of the thing jolted Izuku a bit, but he held it there probably longer than necessary until it was clear that the man wasn't getting up. In the distance he heard sirens. Good. That was good. Where had his whistle landed? No matter. Taking a deep breath, Izuku howled, Mao. The man came running, freezing for only a moment upon seeing all of the blood in the alleyway. He was clearly terrified that someone was dead, which Izuku understood, but he was also acutely aware of every second as it ticked by. Mao, get cuffs on this man now. Use everything you can to restrain him. I don't know when he's going to wake up. Is that the hero killer Stain? The younger officer choked. Get cuffs on him, now, Aisha growled from the ground. Right. And backup is coming, but there's some kind of chaos in another part of the city. We don't know how long it will take, Mao said, firmly handcuffing Stain. Midoriya, you still have a sword in your thigh. It's the only thing keeping me from passing out from blood loss, Izuku said calmly. Thank goodness for adrenaline because I can't feel a thing. The hero student slowly sat up, putting pressure on his wound like Izuku had instructed. Stain's quirk had released when the man passed out, but he was the only one fit enough to move. Mao was tending to Aisha's wounds now that Stain had a pair of handcuffs around his wrists and another around his ankles. But no one was going to die this night, Izuku was fairly confident in that. You're quirkless? The boy asked, pale from blood loss. Why would you run in like that? I'm morally opposed to letting people die, Izuku said. I'm Midoriya Izuku, by the way. Iida Tenya. I must give my sincerest apologies, Midoriya. You were correct in your estimation of me. I was acting out of revenge. It was you, not I, that showed true heroism tonight. I think that's a bit much, but I appreciate the sentiment. Oh, the ambulances are almost here, perfect. From the ground, Aisha groaned. Mao, you're the one who has to explain this situation to Tsukauchi. What? Why me? Mao yelled. You're the only one who didn't get stabbed, Aisha accused. You can tell Suragame first if you want, but you're calling Tsukauchi. It was only moments later that a whole host of police officers and EMTs appeared. The first officer to get to Izuku looked down and swore. Is that the hero killer Stain? Please take him, Izuku said. Before he could observe or say anything more, a gaggle of medical personnel were transferring him to a stretcher. The inside of the ambulance was sterile, and it felt familiar to him after his training, but his adrenaline was beginning to wear off, and the pain was what he would describe as all-consuming. He was pretty sure he asked someone to call his mom, and then he was at the hospital and people kept saying something about surgery. Then, mercifully, the world drifted away and the pain was gone. But it seemed no sooner than he had comfortably fallen asleep when someone was urging him awake, insistently shoving a spoon in his mouth. You need to wake up and eat, someone was saying, shoving the thick, butterscotch pudding into his mouth. Izuku's eyes fluttered open to see he was in a hospital room, his mom standing along with so many people. His head was fuzzy and thinking was just so hard. You just got out of surgery for your leg. How do you feel? The person force-feeding him pudding asked. Izuku attempted to force his mind to cooperate, but it was a struggle. He intended to answer the question, but when he opened his mouth, what came out was, do I get to keep the sword? It's evidence for now, Suragame said with his usual gravity. But we'll see. I should tell Stain thank you, Izuku mumbled, eyes unfocused. He gave me a sword and called me a hero. I always wanted to be a hero. Why don't you become a hero? Iida asked from the bed next to Izuku's. He hadn't noticed the hero student was there. He told me I couldn't, too dangerous for quirkless. He would know, he's a hero. Made me even sadder than what Kachan said. But I'm happy now, Izuku mumbled, yawning. The station is nice. Oh, wait, Chief Surama, Chief. Is Iida going to be in trouble? They have graciously extended mercy so long as we never tell anyone of my involvement, the student in question said. I'm glad you're not in trouble, Izuku said excitedly. Mom. I missed you. Why are you crying? Unable to hold herself back anymore, Inko flung herself at her son. Izuku, you're okay. You nearly gave me a heart attack. Izuku merely hummed, grateful for his mother's presence. Suramage left, claiming he would be back later to get his statement. Mom? Yes, sweetie? What time is it? Inko checked her watch. Around 2 in the morning. You should be sleeping. Oh, I'm fine, Izuku. But Izuku could see how exhausted Inko was, and he was tired himself. Go to my dorm room, you can sleep there. That way you can grab my stuff in the morning before we leave. Besides, Dr. Meiji will want to see me, so he can come here with you. It took a lot more convincing, but finally Inko agreed to take a cab to the university, leaving Izuku alone with Iida. Izuku was drowsy, but his mind was fully functional once more. The painkillers were starting to wear off, but for now it was bearable. I sincerely apologize, Midoriya, Iida said, breaking the silence. I was a selfish fool. I could only recognize the injustice done to my brother, and if it weren't for your intervention, I would likely be dead. The two boys quietly conversed, while in the hallway, Inko happened upon one frazzled detective. She paused. Tsukauchi? The man came screeching to a halt. Inko. Is he okay? He had to have surgery on his leg, but he's fine. He should make a full recovery, Inko said, glad to see the detective. She hesitated before continuing, but he was saying some concerning things when he was recovering from the anesthesia. Like what? Like he should thank Stain because he called Izuku a hero. I hadn't heard anything about this before, but apparently Izuku had a pro-hero tell him he couldn't be a hero, and it hurt worse than everything his bullies told him. Izuku hadn't told me anything about all of this, and I doubt he's going to remember telling me. It worries me, because before your station found him, heroes were Izuku's life. Everything was about finding a way to become one. Tsukauchi's eyes were steel. Do you know what hero told him this? Inko thought briefly back to when they moved and Izuku had donated the entirety of his All Might collection. It was highly unusual, but it was probably just Izuku trying to move on from his former dream. Besides, the day of the sludge villain there were a lot of heroes on scene, and there was no guarantee that it was any of them. No. The detective nodded. Thanks for telling me, Inko. Now go get some sleep. You too, she said with a wry smile. Izuku and Iida were deep in conversation when the door slammed open and Detective Tsukauchi stormed in, the picture of fury in a trench coat. Midoriya Izuku, I know you didn't just happen to be in the same area of Hosu as Stain. What on earth possessed you to intervene with nothing but 2 police officers and a fanny pack? I also had my EMT pack? Izuku said nervously. Tsukauchi collapsed into a chair at his bedside. We're getting you a gun. Really? The hero killer? I'll tell someone my suspicions next time. I was just worried they wouldn't believe me or that we would get there too late, Izuku said. Well, I don't think you have to worry about that in the future. There's already a whole host of police officers that want to steal you from me, Tsukauchi said. Once Mao told me, somehow the entirety of Japan's police force found out that you were the one who took down Stain. Izuku found himself blushing. It's too much. You're well on your way to becoming Japan's favorite police officer, and you're not even officially one yet. But you need to trust in us, kid. We're here to help you, and if you don't start trusting us you're going to keep getting hurt like this. I'm sorry, Izuku said sincerely, ducking his head. Good. I better not be seeing you in the hospital anytime soon, Tsukauchi said seriously. Now I am commandeering this armchair for a few hours, and in the morning, I'm going to pay Mao and Aisha a visit. Izuku yawned. Please don't kill them. I make no promises. Now go to sleep, little Midoriya. Chapter 12. I'm sorry, Mrs. Midoriya, but we can't release your son just yet. What? He's okay, isn't he? Inko asked, eyes wide. Yes, he's healing wonderfully, the doctor assured her. But this injury was no small wound. We're lucky that there wasn't more damage done to him. As it stands, I just want to keep an eye on him to make sure that there are no complications. Inko wrung her hands. I understand that, but I can't afford to take any more time off from my job. I can't just leave Izuku alone. And I don't know if I can afford the hospital bills. Izuku bit his lip, trying not to cry as he listened to his mother fret like this. He hated that he was such a burden. He had been the reason that they moved, and she wouldn't tell him how much his online schooling and Valiant's dojo cost, but it couldn't be cheap. Until he became part of the police force, Izuku couldn't contribute. He was merely a drain on his mother. Now here he was, costing more money that they didn't have, and the guilt was eating him alive. Izuku swallowed, wondering if he could work in a part-time job, at least until. Don't worry about that, Mrs. Midoriya, Detective Tsukauchi cut in, placing a hand on her shoulder. The police take care of their own. Our insurance policy will cover the costs completely. You can return home if you need to. I know that almost everyone in the station was planning on dropping by here at one point or another, so we can arrange shifts so that your son is never alone. Besides, I am being retained as well, Iida said from his own hospital bed, chopping at the air with his good arm. I shall keep him company as best I can. I'll be checking up on your son as well, Dr. Meiji interrupted quickly. Izuku blinked, completely stunned. They were helping? Just like that? Was this what having more than a two-person family felt like? Or were they helping because they felt guilty? That's not necessary, you shouldn't feel like you have to. Tsukauchi put a hand on his head. Reckless teenagers don't get any say in the matter. Izuku squawked in protest, but in actuality, his chest was warmer than he could ever recall it being before. Soon after that, the adults fell into a conversation that wasn't so much exclusive as it was boring, so Izuku took advantage of their distraction and stretched as far as his body would allow, finally able to snag his shone that had been tantalizingly out of reach. Tsukauchi had stolen it last night, claiming that he needed rest, not a distraction. He was marginally impressed that his phone had any battery left at all, and that it hadn't just malfunctioned from all of the notifications. There were roughly 200 text messages from Officer Saito alone, ranging from berating him for his stupidity to pleading for him to be okay. There were also texts from everyone else on the force, excluding Mori, a handful from various people he knew from the dojo, a dozen emails from various teachers, and a few voicemails. One was from Ojiro, one was from Valiant, and there were two from the same unknown number. Curious, Izuku picked the first one from the unknown number. Holding the phone up to his ear, a vaguely familiar voice began speaking. Hi. I was just calling to say thank you for my first day of training. You helped a lot and you were super cool. I hope I see you again sometime soon, Midoriya. Oh. This is Uraraka Ochako, by the way. Izuku hadn't been aware that his phone slipped out of his hand until it clattered to the floor. The noise alerted everyone else in the room, causing some concern while an utterly smitten smile spread across his face. Midoriya, are you all right? Do we need to call the doctor? Talk to us, kid. Izuku, honey, why are you smiling like that? Should I be worried? He instinctively turned to the most familiar voice. A girl, Mom. A girl. What about a girl, Izuku? Inko asked, worry creasing her face even more. What girl? The door to the hospital room slammed open and none other than Officer Saito stomped in, waving a picture around. It's this girl, isn't it, Izuku? One Uraraka Ochako, a hero student in UA's Class 1A. You helped her after the USJ incident and then again on Monday, Gunhead's dojo where you gave her your phone number. Izuku whimpered, feeling like a guilty man on trial even though he had done nothing. No, it's not what you think, Don't you lie to me, little Midoriya. Gunhead told me everything. Saito said, dramatically jabbing a finger at him. But I'm not angry about the girl, little Midoriya. If anything comes of this, I'll have to instill the fear of the station in her, that she's cute and hopefully smart enough not to hurt you. No, I came all the way to Hosu to address your blatant betrayal. It was then that Officer Nakamura appeared in the doorway, panting. Sorry, little Midoriya. I tried to rein her in, but she locked me in a janitor's closet and made it here before me. Betrayal? Iida asked, scandalized. You lost our Snapchat streak, Saito declared, seemingly near tears. And then you didn't confirm your crush to me. You're supposed to divulge your secrets to me. And then you had to get yourself hurt on top of it all. Nakamura wheezed, producing an inhaler and taking a few puffs before snarling. You need to get your priorities straight. We were almost to 50 days. If I can snap him in the middle of a drug bust to keep the thing alive, then. Saito, what have I said about using your phone on the job? She cursed quietly under her breath. I forgot that Dadtective was here. Nakamura, why didn't you warn me? You, dug, your grave, Nakamura wheezed, starting to get his breathing under control. The doctor cleared his throat. I was letting this slide before, but with this many people we should really only have family in the room. I really should get going anyway. Office hours are starting soon, Dr. Meiji said regretfully. Heal quickly, Midoriya. I look forward to your next visit. Once Meiji had departed, the doctor looked expectantly at the others in the room, though mainly Saito. Looking him dead in the eyes with a completely straight face, she said, he's my brother, can't you see the resemblance? How are you, Mom? She asked, giving Inko a wooden hug. Inko patted the woman who was obviously too old to be her daughter on the back. Normally she would have protested the lie, but it was true in all but blood. The police station were more like family to Izuku than anyone but Inko herself. And him? The doctor asked, pointedly looking at Nakamura. He's our great uncle, she said without missing a beat. The doctor sighed in resignation. Just don't get too rowdy. It was then that Iida chose to lean over and whisper, are you truly smitten with Uraraka? Unfortunately, Iida was terrible at whispering, and the entire room heard him. Izuku paled as every eye present came to rest on him. It was his mother of all people that asked, Izuku, who is this Uraraka Ochako? Izuku flailed, unsure of how to answer and praying for deliverance. It seemed just then that he had apparently done something right in his life, because it actually came. A nurse stepped in to collect Iida and Izuku to get them out of their room and visit some other patients. At that point Izuku was ready to fling himself off the bed, but he settled for nodding vigorously while Iida agreed as well. The two were transferred into wheelchairs while Izuku insisted that he and Iida went alone with the nurses until finally they were pushed away from prying eyes. Once out of earshot, Iida said, I must beg your forgiveness, Midoriya. I was not nearly discreet enough. Don't worry about it, Iida. And yeah, I think I do well like Uraraka. She's one of the first girls I've ever met that didn't care I was quirkless. She is indeed a person of the highest caliber, as are you, Iida said almost proudly, like a mother hen talking about her chicks. We're at the first room, one of the nurses announced before pushing the door open. The room was nearly identical to theirs, but only one of the beds was taken, and this room was littered with candy wrappers and the like. From his armchair next to the occupied bed, still chewing on a candy bar, Officer Mao languidly poked Officer Aisha awake while Izuku excitedly said, It's great to see you both. I'm glad you're healing well, Officer Aisha. It took a minute for Aisha's eyes to focus enough to see the boys before a smile spread across his face. Hey, Midoriya. You haven't tried to take down any homicidal maniacs since I last saw you, have you? Not yet, but it's not quite lunchtime, Izuku said with a smile. That was amazing, kid, but a little warning next time? Mao asked. I know you probably have experience being doubted because you're a quirkless teenager, but that's not going to be the case anymore. You're the golden child of the police department. What? Both officers stared at him. Haven't you seen the news? I made the news? Oh, geez, Mao said, picking up the remote and flipping through a few channels. Izuku only caught snippets from each, but it was enough. Hero killer Stain stopped by a quirkless 15-year-old. Some question the legitimacy of the story and whether or not it was all a ploy to raise the public opinion of quirkless individuals. Midoriya Izuku, a quirkless 15-year-old, reportedly accomplished what an abundance of pro-heroes have been unable to. This begs the question, are quirks really helpful, or have we become too reliant on them? Here we have. Taser sales have skyrocketed overnight. More on. Was just a fluke, a lucky coincidence, Endeavor was saying, staring into the camera. Children, especially defenseless children, should keep out of hero work. Mao turned off the TV. You're everywhere. Some people love you, some people hate you. Endeavor is pissed beyond belief, and so he's been attempting to downplay your fight and talk up the strength of those Nomu things. I think he's really just jealous that you took down such a high-profile villain without a quirk. Jealous? Izuku squeaked. For better or for worse, you're making a name for yourself. Your face is being plastered everywhere, both of you. The police as a whole are getting the most positive publicity than we've gotten since the institution of public heroes. This is probably going to be a fleeting thing. In a month you might seem vaguely familiar to someone in the grocery store, but people are going to remember that it was a quirkless kid that took down Stain, Aisha said gravely. But kid, from what I know of you, this is only the start of one of the brightest careers I've ever seen. I look forward to what you do next. As long as you warn your partners, Mao said immediately and sternly. Now get out of here. If Aisha doesn't get more rest, his wife will kill both of us. Izuku and Iida bid the two farewell as their nurses pushed them out of the room and further down the hallway. Neither boy asked any questions when they were pushed into a room a few doors down where Native was being visited by Manuel. Both heroes were happy to see the boys, but wasted no time telling them that they were reckless and stupid that night. But Native ended by saying, if it weren't for you two though, I'd be dead, so I have to say thank you. Manuel smiled. I think you've learned your lesson, Tenya. But thank you, Midoriya. You kept him alive when I couldn't. I hear you want to be a detective, and I think I speak for many heroes when I say that I look forward to working with you. Izuku managed to hold back his tears, but only just. Me too. He sniffled as they were pushed from the room. He was still trying not to cry when Iida said, our room is in the opposite direction, and surely there are no more patients. Have you forgotten about me so easily, Tenya? Iida froze at the sound of the newcomer's voice. Brother? Izuku glanced around to find a man who looked remarkably like Iida wheeling up in a wheelchair of his own. Ingenium. A harried nurse materialized behind him. Sir, you're not allowed to be moving about on your own yet. I just wanted to make sure my brother hadn't forgotten me, Ingenium said with a winning smile. It was roughly about that moment that Izuku felt like his heart was about to explode because holy woe, the Ingenium sat right in front of him. I could never forget you. Iida said fervently, his eyes shining with tears. Brother, I must apologize. I thought I was avenging you, but in reality I merely let my anger overwhelm me. I'm so sorry, brother, I have failed to uphold the ideals of heroism that you taught me. Iida was crying in earnest now, but he jolted when his brother placed a comforting hand atop his head. You acted rashly, Tenya, that's true. But I know you, and you will learn from this and become a better hero than I ever was. You will make Ingenium a hero to look up to. Thank you, brother. I won't let you down again, Iida said, wiping at his tears. I know you won't, Ingenium said warmly before his eyes came to rest on Izuku. And I'm assuming you're the person I have to thank for keeping my brother alive. Oh, I didn't do much, really. But it's an honor to meet you, Ingenium, sir. I've looked up to you for. Izuku was pulled from what could potentially the most embarrassing mutterstorm of his life when an irritated voice called, Tensai, I won't bring you to your checkups with your surgeon if you're never where you're supposed to be. Ingenium wheeled around enough to look at the speaker. Ah, but Shota, I was popping in on my darling little brother and his new friend. Izuku swallowed as none other than Aizawa strolled into view, displeasure clear on his face. I didn't think I'd get the opportunity to lecture you two so soon. You were both reckless and stupid. Iida, I expect you to learn from this, and learn well. You're only alive because Midoriya is a trained EMT, and a good one at that. I trust that you'll rein in your emotions in the future. Of course, Mr. Aizawa. You have my sincerest apologies. Don't expect the government to take it easy on you. You used your quirk illegally, and there will be a penalty, Aizawa warned. You were being a vigilante in every sense of the word. Iida hung his head. I am aware. And you, Aizawa said, his glare sharpening on Izuku. I'm sure Tsukauchi covered most things already, problem child, but I've spoken with Gunhead and Valiant about methods of countering various types of weapons. The next time I hear that you've taken a sword to the thigh, I'm going to make you wish that the villain had finished the job. I'll be more careful, Izuku said, furiously nodding. Ingenium's mouth curled even further upwards. I didn't know you knew the hero of the hour, Shota. I know him well enough to know that Midoriya didn't stumble across Stain by accident, Aizawa said, his eyes boring into the depths of Izuku's soul. But I also know he's one of the most capable problem children I've ever come across. I swear, when I find whatever fool of a pro hero told him he couldn't be one of us, I'm going to hang them upside down with my capture weapon. That is the highest praise I have ever heard from Aizawa Shota. Take heart, Midoriya, that means that you're doing something incredibly right. Thank you for saving my little brother. I may no longer be able to be a hero, but I can rest easy knowing that I'm leaving the world in the hands of you two, Tensai said with a bittersweet smile. Now we need to get going. If Shota isn't back by a certain time, his cats will riot and I will be hearing about it for months. Izuku wasn't sure what to feel as he watched Ingenium and Aizawa leave. He was still not completely present, thanks to his pain medication and the poor sleep afforded by hospital beds. He thought about nothing and everything at the same time as he was wheeled back to his hospital room, where he would sit aside Iida for days, making a lifelong friend and ally. In those few days, Izuku was able to pretend he was just a teenager with Iida, as if neither of their pictures were broadcasted across every news channel while millions of strangers formulated opinions of each of them. Each boy was blissfully unaware that the happenings of that fateful night was already changing their nation as it stood, potentially even the world. The specifics and their faces would be widely forgotten, but the emotions behind it all never would. However, the details were not forgotten by all. Many eyes now rested on Midoriya Izuku, for better or for worse. Chapter 13. I can see you've been keeping up with your therapy, even though Recovery Girl healed you, Aizawa said as he and Izuku circled one another, each waiting for the other to strike first. That's good, you're probably stronger than you were before. Izuku did his best to regulate his breathing, ignoring the sweat sticking his shirt to his body. I have a lot of people who care about my well-being for once, I would hate to let them down. If you recognize that much, you'll do us all a favor and stop taking swords to the thigh. But it's true that you've got an army of people making sure that you reach your full potential, Aizawa said, one of his unsettling smiles spreading across his face. Speaking of that, I showed Nezu your analysis of me, and he's intrigued. You did what? In that millisecond of Izuku's surprise, Aizawa struck. After a flurry of motion, Izuku ended up with his face pressed into the practice mat. I think you know what I'm going to say, problem child. Never let my guard down, Izuku groaned, the words muffled. Aizawa let off, even offering a hand to help him up. But I was serious about Nezu. He was already curious about you, but your analysis left him fascinated. Izuku swallowed thickly. He had come to know that the attention of UA's principal was by no means a good thing. So what does that mean? It means we're done for today, Aizawa said, rolling his shoulders. If you're up to it, Nezu has invited you for tea just about now. It's up to you whether or not to accept the invitation, but I would remind you that Nezu has been gracious enough to allow you the use of UA property. As terrifying as the prospect was, Izuku couldn't deny his curiosity. Which way to his office? The principal's office was impressive, but simple as UA in general seemed to be. The principal of indeterminate species glanced up from his paperwork when the door opened. Ah, Mr. Midoriya. I was wondering whether or not you would accept my offer. At the very least I should thank you for allowing me to train on school property with school staff, even though I am not one of your students, Izuku said, trying not to sound as flustered as he felt. I've been curious about you ever since I was approached about training you by not only Recovery Girl, but Eraserhead as well, Nezu said, motioning for Izuku to sit down. Naturally, I had also been informed about the new Provisional Police Badge program that currently has exactly one participant, and Dr. Meiji has been bragging about the pupil he snagged out from under my nose. Imagine my surprise when I learned that all of these monumental achievements belong to the same 15-year-old. I can't express how right Meiji is. It really is a shame that I wasn't able to welcome you into UA as one of our students. But no matter, it appears you're being trained properly on multiple accounts. As I'm sure Aizawa told you, I've seen your analysis of him, and I'm fascinated. Would you care for a conversation over tea? I'd be delighted, Izuku said cautiously, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He'd heard too many stories about the principal for there not to be another shoe. I've heard about you from many people, Midoriya. You've been taken on by a number of pro heroes that wish to train you, even outside of Eraserhead and Recovery Girl, and you've taken down the hero killer Stain yourself. Why not try to become a hero? Nezu asked. When I was younger I wanted nothing more, Izuku admitted. But there's no way that you don't know that I'm quirkless, Principal Nezu. And there's no way that you don't know by now that you easily could have become a hero without a quirk, Nezu countered. You've easily proven yourself more capable than some of our own hero course students. I have that confidence now, but when I needed it, there were lines of people telling me that becoming a hero wasn't a possibility, including heroes, Izuku said with a bittersweet smile. But I like the path I'm on. As much as I would love it, I know I can't change your mind, Nezu said. Just as I know that you're Meiji's protege. But I would like to ask a favor of you, Midoriya. Yes? I'd like to get to know you better. I understand you're a busy man, so all that I ask is that you make time to have tea with me once a month. I already find myself invested in your future. Oh, of course. I would love to. The longer the conversation went on, the more Izuku found himself relaxing. He had heard plenty of stories about the unsettling feeling that came with the attention of Nezu, but Izuku felt no such discomfort. Nezu was wildly intelligent, yes, but he was perfectly kind and polite to Izuku. Meanwhile, Nezu was becoming more and more intrigued by this child every minute. He was beginning to see the full scope of the true tragedy of UA never teaching Midoriya Izuku, at least not in any way they could officially take credit for. After all, it was for someone precisely like Midoriya that Nezu had allowed quirkless children apply to the hero course. When the time came, Nezu reluctantly let the boy go. He was already formulating subtle topics of conversation for next month to learn more about the boy. Midoriya was bright and genuine, and he had a rare strength of character. He was completely selfless in his desire to help people. Indeed, on more than one occasion Aizawa had muttered about the boy getting himself killed. But Nezu knew how quirkless people were treated, especially the ones who refused to stay in the shadows. Nezu felt a strange kinship with Midoriya Izuku, he supposed. The boy bore so many of those signs of someone used and abused by humans, many of those signs that Nezu himself once bore. How the boy was so free of hatred and anger was a mystery, though. If such a creature did exist, surely it deserved better than this world. A knock sounded at the open office door where Aizawa and Chio stood. You called for us? Ah, yes. Come in, please. Come in, Nezu said brightly. As you two know him best, tell me a bit about Midoriya Izuku. Meanwhile, Izuku sneezed on his walk home. Bless you. Thank yo. Hey. Shinso. I haven't seen you for a while. The purple-haired boy looked just as exhausted as ever, but he half smiled. If you would stop sacrificing limbs to stop serial killers, then maybe we could find time to hang out. It was only one time, and I had limited options, Izuku said defensively. You people act like I have a secret quirk that causes me injuries. I'm just screwing with you, Midoriya. Really though, I haven't seen you for a while with your gimpy leg and whatnot. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Recovery girl took pity on me and healed me, but she also made me promise to go through physical therapy before I was allowed to spar again. Today was my first day back with Aizawa, and I'm going back to the dojo on Monday. I would say it sounds like you've had some spare time lately, but I know you've just overachieved as usual. I wouldn't call it overachieving. What? Shinso asked, amusement clear in his eyes. You only added another 30 pages to your analysis of Eraserhead, and then you finished high school just because? I still have a term and a half left of high school, Izuku muttered. And I analyzed a lot of people, not just Eraserhead. So you took it easy, Shinso said, completely deadpan. Midoriya, it pains me to say this, but you need to get out more, have some fun. I have fun. Izuku protested. Just last week we had a birthday party for Officer Kondo at the station. I mean fun that doesn't involve people a decade older than us. But Mori is only. No, Midoriya. First of all, he hates you. Besides, if anything Mori is anti-fun. Izuku thought before grumbling. Okay then, what do you suggest I do for fun? Shinso had the audacity to shrug without looking up from his phone. Don't ask me, I haven't had fun in years. Well then it sounds like you need to go and have fun just as much as I do. What do your friends do for fun? Bold of you to assume I have friends. Well, I know Ojiro trains, and Iida also trains, Izuku said slowly. I'm assuming that training isn't counting as fun. No. Isn't the mall supposed to be fun? People seem to go there a lot. Shinso wrinkled his nose. The mall? Where hundreds of troglodytes that think themselves superior to you and me flock. Surely this is not the mall that you speak of. You're being dramatic. Tomorrow, if you're free, we can go to the mall for a while, and when we get bored, we can go play video games at your house. The two stared one another down before Izuku added, if the mall is awful, I'll pay for lunch. A slow smile spread across Shinso's face. I believe we have a deal, Midoriya. No super expensive sushi. The two parted with plans to meet the next morning. Izuku was absurdly excited. He had no idea what to do at the mall. He had only been a handful of times with his mom, and that usually consisted of her shoving various clearance clothes at him in a desperate attempt to get him to wear something other than his shirts. He doubted this would be like that, but he was going to the mall with a friend. This was even more exciting than the time he'd gone to the arcade with Ojiro. When he got there, Izuku barreled right into his house, and upon finding Inko asked, Can I go to the mall with Shinso tomorrow? Inko blinked. Say that one more time, slower. Can I go to the mall with Shinso tomorrow? She began blinking again, but this time it was blinking tears from her eyes. Of course you can. My baby, going to the mall with a friend. There were quite a few tears shared between the mother and son, and later that night Izuku could hardly sleep for excitement. For a day he was going to be a normal teenager at the mall with a friend. That said, Izuku woke up absurdly early Saturday morning. He knew Shinso would never stand for being woken up at this time, and the mall wasn't even open yet, so Izuku found himself running to the police station. He could say hi to whoever happened to be on duty. Smiling at the thought, Izuku slowed to a jog, and then a walk when he got to the front entrance into the station. He would need to shower once he got home, and then he could. Ah, it's the golden child. Of course you just get up and go for a run at the crack of dawn, because Midoriya actually has his life together. Well, you listen here, you little twerp. People only like you because they feel bad for you. Stain probably. Mori was cut off when Soma slapped a hand over his mouth. Don't pay attention to him, Midoriya. He's a little bitter about having the graveyard shift, and sleep deprivation brings out a different side of him. It makes him honest. At least he's finally off meter maid duty, Izuku said, moving to the water cooler for a drink. Saito's got a betting pool on how long that lasts, Tamikawa said, emerging from the staff room. I'm giving him a week. Mori wrenched Soma's hand from his mouth. Why are you even here, kid? I swear you're here more often than I am, and I'm paid to be here. It's pathetic, don't you have friends? Soma tensed, ready to send Mori to the corner, but Izuku just laughed. I'm actually going to hang out with a friend later today. I just woke up early and had time to kill. Besides, I love being here, don't you? The more Izuku spoke, the more Mori looked like he was about to explode. I need either more sleep or more caffeine to deal with this brat. While Mori sat in his corner, of his own volition, Izuku enjoyed tea and donuts with the other officers. Saito brought donuts to the station at least weekly to keep up their image. Izuku stayed like that even after Soma and Mori finished their shift. He simply made more tea and enjoyed it with Sasaki and Kondo when they came in, and later Tsukauchi. Sasaki thanked Tsukauchi for the last of the fritters before asking, "So little Midoriya, how's the police academy treating you?" "Oh, I'm learning tons," Izuku said excitedly, eyes shining. "And since the stain incident, the other students have been leaving me alone." Kondo paused, her teacup halfway to her lips. Her eyes were extra frosty as she asked, "They've been messing with you?" "Oh, nothing as bad as middle school was," Izuku said blithely. "Mostly they would just ignore me, but a few people claimed that I was too young and a waste of resources. One of them found out that I was involved in multiple cases that made the news and tried to convince people that I just wanted to be famous or something. Why didn't you tell anyone about this before?" Sasaki demanded, her wings fluttering anxiously. "It's no big deal," Izuku said quickly. "Really, it's nothing. I was used to dealing with worse in middle school. Their teasing means nothing if it gets me to my goal. Besides, now I've got all of you guys standing behind me, along with real friends. I couldn't possibly complain about any of that." Izuku stayed and chatted until it was almost time to meet Shinso. He waved goodbye before racing out the door. If he hurried, he would have just enough time to shower. Once Midoriya was definitely out of earshot, Kondo made eye contact with each of her coworkers. "We're going to drop in on some of those police academy trainings, aren't we?" "Right after we shut down his middle school for neglect," Tsukauchi said, already scribbling notes. "Midoriya is too stubborn to name names, but I'm sure I can find something." While those people at the police station began plotting, Izuku was practically skipping home. It had already started off as a wonderful day, and now he was going to the mall with a friend. What could go wrong? Chapter 14. Somehow Shinso looked even more exhausted than usual when he opened the front door. Violet eyes landed on the excited face of Izuku briefly before the door almost immediately closed on his face. Izuku blinked, but before he could really question what had just happened, Shinso reappeared with sunglasses in place. "Now I can handle your smile. Let's go, sunshine child." "I can't wait," Izuku said, practically bouncing along the pavement. "Are you going taser shopping? You'd probably get some free stuff. A new self-defense store opened in the mall, and they say that you're the reason business is booming. They even sell those awful fanny packs that you love so much," Shinso said, eyeing the offensive article in question. "It was a gift," he said, adjusting the Save My Fanny pack. He preferred that name, especially when he was wearing it with one of his labeled t-shirts. It fit with the puns on them. He just had to be careful to call it the "Don't Rape Me" kit in front of Saito and Sasaki. "It looks like a bruised banana fused onto your waist," Shinso deadpanned. "What was that?" You want one for Christmas? Midoriya, you wouldn't, Shinso said in a warning voice. Izuku said nothing, only walking faster. Worried, Shinso also picked up the pace. Midoriya, get your broccoli butt back here. Breaking into a run, Izuku sprinted through the mall entrance, expertly dodging the hordes of people. But Shinso wasn't far behind. Dashing around the mall courtyard, he turned back to taunt. I think lime green would really make your eyes pop. Midoriya, I swear I'm going to. Wait, watch out. Just as Shinso called out, Izuku felt, or rather, didn't feel his foot strike the ground. Stairs. He had survived the sludge villain, a kidnapper, and even the hero killer, but he was going to meet his end via stairs. Izuku readied himself for the fall that would break a bone and finally make the police station get him a protective bubble, but it never came. He hadn't realized he closed his eyes until he opened them back up. He felt odd, weightless, and standing in front of him was. Sorry, I just used my quirk like that, said Uraraka. I figured you wouldn't want to fall. Oh, I know you. Hi Midoriya. Izuku easily got his feet under him once more and she released her quirk, returning Izuku's world back to normal. Thanks for the save, your quirk really is amazing. Izuku gushed, hoping his face wasn't as red as it felt. I mean, I already knew that, but... Hey, Midoriya, Ojiro interrupted, sensing that he was about to get lost in a more embarrassing tangent than usual. What brings you to the mall? Izuku cleared his throat, thankful for the direction in conversation. Oh, nothing in particular. I just had free time for once, so I convinced Shinso to come with me. He trailed off awkwardly, suddenly noticing the palpable tension between the 1A students and Shinso. The boy in question didn't bother to take off his sunglasses, he just lazily glanced at them over the frames. At ease, 1A. I'm not here to fight you. Besides, Midoriya is a bit of a stickler for following quirk laws. I suppose your class is here to get ready for your mysterious summer camp. He had recognized a few students from 1A, but seeing the majority of the class there made Izuku's mouth go dry. Oh, you must be waiting for your other classmates, then. Just Ashido and Tokiyami, Ojiro said. Bakugo and Todoroki aren't coming. A redhead with remarkably sharp teeth broke into the conversation before anyone but Ojiro and Shinso could pick up on Izuku's relief. Midoriya, you're the guy that took down Stain, aren't you? That's super manly, bro. How do you know Ojiro and Uraraka? He was one of the EMTs after the USJ incident. He was super nice. Hagakuri said, startling a few people around her. Midoriya goes to the same dojo as me, Ojiro said in his calm manner. And he helped train me at my internship, Uraraka said brightly. Oh wow, you must be really good then, said a blonde standing just a tad too close to the earphone jack girl. Duh, he took down Stain, she said, her jacks forming a cross to ward him off. As the class fawned over Midoriya, Ochako stood back and observed. The boy seemed more confident than the last time she'd seen him, but she felt the need to thank him. Even more, she felt the need to know him, to be his friend. It was strange and rare, but unexplainable. Tenya watched Uraraka watching Midoriya and felt duty-bound to give Midoriya the opportunity to at least talk to the girl alone, yet in an appropriate setting such as this. When there was a lull in the conversation, he broke in, hand-chopping the air with each syllable. Midoriya, you and Uraraka should take this opportunity to get to know one another outside of a professional capacity, as you have been able to with Ojiro and myself. This appears to be extremely fortuitous timing. Ooh, like a date? Ashido asked, appearing out of nowhere and startling Izuku. Who's the green bean? BB, but I came here with Shinso, Izuku said in a panicked mutter, his arms contorting into crazy shapes as he sought to hide his red face. I can't just leave him alone. Shinso could accompany me while I seek out more durable glasses frames. I would rather die. Or we could all meet up afterwards, perhaps to get a healthy smoothie. Iida said proudly, ignoring Shinso's comment altogether. Smoothies sound good, Kirishima said. Ashido looked around helplessly. Seriously, who is Midoriya? How does everyone know this kid but me? Izuku and Shinso parted ways with 1A, much to their relief. Izuku knew exactly what Iida was trying to do, and while he appreciated it, it was bad for his heart. He just knew if they stayed any longer he would make a complete fool of himself. At least Iida hadn't attempted to whisper anything to him. Shinso was just glad to get away from Class 1A. The two wandered the mall, looking at anything that intrigued either of them, which translates to anything that interested Midoriya. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but Shinso made it no secret that Midoriya would be buying him lunch. When Shinso still showed complete apathy an hour or so later, Midoriya looked a bit like a kicked puppy. He'd stopped teasing Shinso about buying him a Save My Fanny pack. He really still couldn't say, "Don't rape me, Kit," without blushing. But now Midoriya looked like he was about to cry, and Shinso didn't know if he was emotionally equipped to deal with that. "I'm sorry I made you come with me. I just thought we should do something fun while we both had time. I'll text Iida and tell him we had to leave early and—" "Hey, it's fine, Midoriya," Shinso said, cutting off the other boy's mumbling. "I'm actually enjoying this more than I thought I would. I just don't know how to deal with people. Or emotions. It's a miracle I haven't scared you off yet." Izuku sniffed. "You promise you're not just saying that?" "Nah, I wouldn't lie to you. Hey, we should go into that shop. I can get something for that blonde jerk from 1A. Just made sure it's not traceable," Izuku said, feeling a bit better as they made their way towards the joke shop in question. "I would hate to have to solve your murder." Shinso squinted at him. "You seem to be very well informed on Mr. Compensates with explosions. Ooh, look, they've got Chinese finger traps on sale," Izuku said brightly. "Apparently these are specially made to withstand minor strength enhancement quirks. Nice subject change. Hand me that powder that apparently makes everything you eat taste like radishes by your hand." The two spent quite some time in the joke shop until Izuku noticed the food court rapidly filling up. "Shinso, I'm going to buy my stuff and go get a table for us. I'll meet you there." "Fine, go make sure everything is perfect for your date," he replied. "Though are you really buying 20 Chinese finger traps?" "It's not a date," Izuku muttered, red staining his cheeks. "Semantics. Go make Space Girl proud." Still blushing, Izuku scuttled away, clutching his purchases close to his body. He likely would have skipped though the mall if there had been less of a crowd. As it stood he was jostled back and forth, and he worried about finding a table until he saw it. There was a pocket in the food court that was practically uninhabited. He just had to claim it. He had to hustle, but Izuku made it to the largest table the area offered before anyone else could. He grinned happily. It would be fun to have smoothies with his friends at the mall. Part of him almost didn't believe that any of this day was happening. It had seemed like maybe he would never get to experience these normal teenager things. There was some time before everyone would get there, so Izuku pulled out his phone. Dr. Meiji had had some feedback on his last analysis, and he hadn't gotten the chance to read it yet. He was so absorbed in reading it that Izuku didn't realize anyone was near until that person sat directly next to him and rasped, "Wow, I recognize you. You're that kid from the news, the quirkless boy who stopped Stain." Izuku's head jerked up, his eyes meeting the man's red ones framed by pale blue hair. He couldn't help but notice how dry and cracked the man's lips were, which was somehow his most distinguishing characteristic. An uneasy feeling settled into Izuku's gut, but he took care to breathe steadily and deeply even as the man slung an arm over his shoulders. That was quite the accomplishment, taking down Stain with nothing but your little pack. It was all the media could talk about for weeks. It must be so frustrating for you. They still talk about him, but you've been forgotten or mocked by the public, along with the other things that happened in Hosu that night. Drawing as far away from the man as he could, Izuku slowly asked, You mean those Nomu things that attacked the city that night? The man had some nervous tics, and one of them seemed to be playing with the neck of his hoodie, fingers curled like he wanted to scratch at his neck. The neck of his hoodie was frayed, and, no. The edge of the fabric wasn't frayed, the fabric was flaking away in a pattern that he had only seen once before. Images of Aizawa's destroyed elbow flashed through his mind. This was not good. Oh, you remember at least. Tell me, quirkless boy, you've been pretty mistreated, haven't you? Even after you were the one to take down Stain, he gets all of the attention and praise. Doesn't it just piss you off? Reaching for his fanny pack was too noticeable, too obvious, and as 4 fingers came to rest on his throat, Izuku swallowed heavily. He couldn't make or cause any abrupt movements, not without losing his esophagus. Aizawa had been happy to explain this particular quirk to him. It definitely pisses me off, the man continued, despite Izuku's failure to respond. But we could fix that for you. Are you trying to reform society or something? Izuku asked, his fingers silently snaking into his bag. Well, yes, but I was talking about your quirklessness, he said as if it meant nothing. I should introduce myself. I do want us to be comrades, after all. I'm Shigaraki Tamura, leader of the League of Villains, Izuku interrupted. So you've heard of me, Shigaraki said with a grin that showed too many teeth. I've taken an interest in you, Midoriya. Do you know why that is? Izuku found what he wanted in the bag, holding it steady in the hand that wasn't in Shigaraki's direct line of sight. He had one shot at this. If he screwed up, he was definitely dead, and it would inevitably endanger countless civilians as well. Trying to sound normal, he asked, No, why are you interested in me? Because we're the same, Midoriya, he rasped. Abused, overlooked, neglected by heroes. So what are you proposing? Izuku asked, his voice deceptively calm and confident. Join us. Join us and you'll have the power and the quirk to get back at everyone, even the heroes that have failed you. In his passion, Shigaraki's grip on Izuku's throat loosened. Time seemed to slow down, each of Izuku's heartbeats pounding through his body. He struggled to keep his mind calm, taking a few deep breaths before he struck. Moving as quickly as his body allowed, one hand wrenched back the finger that wasn't resting on Izuku's neck while the other hand jammed a Chinese finger trap onto that finger. While the man yelled in surprise, Izuku's hand darted out and snatched the first finger he could on Shigaraki's other hand, brutally shoving it into the other end of the trap. What do you think you're doing, brat? I can't. Before Shigaraki could even really threaten Izuku, he shoved a second Chinese finger trap onto the man, cementing Izuku's temporary safety. Fury lit Shigaraki's eyes, a feral fury that made Izuku shake in his seat. I'll kill you, Midoriya. I'll find everything and everyone. Yo, who are you? Some crusty creep that likes to prey on young boys. A new voice broke in. How dare you, all key. Step away from Midoriya and shut up, Shinso commanded in a flat voice. When Shigaraki did as commanded with a vacant stare, Izuku put as much distance between the two as possible, breathing deeply, trying to keep his tears from falling. What did he do, Midoriya? He was trying to recruit me, Izuku said. I need to call Tsukauchi. Is that the leader of the League of Villains? Iida hissed in a whisper, which meant that only people within a 10-foot radius heard. The members of 1A that had just gotten to the table gasped and began asking questions all at once as Midoriya began babbling into the phone. Their noise only grew, and Shinso felt his eye twitch a few times. All of you, shut up. Ojiro, you know Midoriya best, comfort him. Class president, go get mall security, Shinso commanded before prying the phone out of Izuku's hand. Detective, this is Shinso Hitoshi. Shinso, what's going on? A frantic Tsukauchi demanded over the phone. I couldn't make out what Midoriya was trying to tell me. Hey, Pikachu, don't you dare touch the crusty dude, Shinso hissed at Kaminari, who was curiously sidling a little too close to Shigaraki. "Detective, you should probably get to the mall as quickly as possible. It appears that Midoriya has caught the leader of the League of Villains in a Chinese finger trap." By the time Shinso had explained all he could and hung up, Ojiro had Izuku calmed down and Ida was coming back with 2 mall cops in tow. A handful of the 1A students had actually made themselves useful and begun herding people away from the area. "Midoriya, should I release my quirk to avoid legal ramifications, or command him to come along peacefully? Technically, any unauthorized public quirk use is illegal. I would let it go and we'll all just conveniently forget that it ever happened," Izuku said, meeting eyes with the various members of 1A. Ojiro watched, fascinated as Shigaraki immediately transformed into a screaming, flailing child. As the mall cops descended, Ojiro said, "I have to apologize, Shinso. I see now that I judged you and your quirk on my own ideas of being a hero. You're just doing the best you can, just like the rest of us. I'm glad Midoriya could see past that when I couldn't." "Please don't start crying," Shinso said. "But I judged you a little too harshly too. Thanks for helping Midoriya." Izuku glanced between the two with shining eyes until Shinso deadpanned, "We're not going to hug it, that's what you were waiting for." Chapter 15. "I don't know if we should be more concerned for little Midoriya when he gets here or the detective," Saito said as she filed papers. Tamakawa looked up from polishing his bell collar. "Why should we be worried about the detective?" Saito glanced around, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Nakamura told me she found a receipt for like 12 bottles of antacids. You didn't hear this from me, but Tsukauchi might be on his way to another ulcer. But he hasn't had one since." But the cat-headed officer was interrupted by the door opening to reveal the smiling face of Midoriya Izuku. "Good morning, Saito, Tamakawa. How are you two today?" "Little Midoriya. We're Chinese finger traps?" Tsukauchi roared, emerging from his office. "You nearly died at the hand of the leader of the League of Villains, and you bet your life on Chinese finger traps?" "Yes?" Izuku squeaked. "Let's calm down, Detective," Tamakawa said gently. "It was actually brilliant on Midoriya's part." "Brilliance doesn't do anything if it pisses off someone enough to kill you," Tsukauchi said, shaking Izuku by the shoulders. "It wouldn't matter if we had kept him in custody, but he never even made it to police custody. He disappeared before anyone could arrive on the scene." A woman Izuku had never met before appeared from Tsukauchi's office, smacking the man. "That wasn't the kid's fault, he did more than his part. Just tell the kid he did a good job. I have every right to worry, I don't know what I'd do it." "Naomasa, shut up," the woman said, menacingly adjusting her incredibly thick lensed glasses. "I know exactly how you feel, it's called being a parent. But you're turning into a helicopter parent, which is not healthy. Now tell the kid he did well." Izuku frantically waved his arms. "Oh, that's not necessary. Detective Tsukauchi is right, I can be reckless. Midoriya, it was well done, I just can't help but worry about you," Tsukauchi interrupted, gently placing a hand on his shoulder once more. The boy stared at the detective a few moments before promptly bursting into tears. "Saito told me the kid was a crier, but I didn't expect it to be this bad," the woman said. "Anyway, it's nice to meet you. Midoriya. I'm Detective Kimura. I specialize in investigating homicides, but I'm currently away on maternity leave. Tsukauchi just wanted a second opinion on a case, though I'm glad I got to meet you." "You've heard of me?" Izuku asked, eyes still watering. "Oh, I feel like I already know you. Everyone has told me so much about you, all of it good except what Mori says. But I've never liked him anyway." "You too, Kimura? Seriously?" Mori called from his corner. "Anyway, I look forward to working together. I've got to go, and Naomasa has some things to talk to you about," Kimura said with a kind smile. "Saito, you can accompany me to my car and clean up the Vaseline you smeared under the door handles." How did you know? Saito demanded. I'm a mother. I see all. While Saito squabbled with Kimura, Tsukauchi waved Izuku into his office. Once inside, Tsukauchi ran a hand through his hair. Kimura is right, you did incredibly well at the mall considering the circumstances. It just bothers me that it happened at all. You shouldn't constantly be in danger like this. But I need to learn to accept that it will only get worse from here. Izuku bit his lip, worries he'd pushed down coming to the surface. Tsukauchi? When Shigaraki was talking to me, he said some things I didn't say in my report. Oh? The detective straightened, his eyes serious. I'm sure you had good reason. It was just a feeling, Izuku said hesitantly, and Naomasa was instantly concerned. In his time with the boy, he'd been happy to see how confident he'd grown. It had been obvious, in the beginning, that this strange, wonderful boy had been hurt beyond what he should have been able to handle. And in that one sentence, they were back to square one. I trust your judgment, Naomasa said firmly. He bit his lip before nodding. Shigaraki said we were the same. We were both looked down on by society and forgotten by heroes. He wanted me to join him, and he offered me power and a quirk. I know that's not possible, but for a minute it sounded really good. Tsukauchi felt his heart stutter at the boy's words. It couldn't be, no. They weren't sure that All for One was alive. It was just a suspicion because of those Nomu things, and he refused to entertain the idea that All for One was so close to Midoriya. For a moment. I wanted it, Izuku confessed, tears overflowing. I wanted to show everyone that I wasn't just a useless Deku, prove it to my classmates and teachers, and even the heroes that told me I could never be one of them. He was crying in earnest now, and the detective didn't know what to do other than to embrace the boy. Now more than ever he wanted to take away Izuku's pain, make the people who had hurt him realize the full extent of what they'd done. But he couldn't do anything about that now. I don't know everything about your past, Midoriya, but anyone would have felt that way. But I know you would never do anything like that, Midoriya. You more than anyone are motivated by the simple desire to help people. You're already more of a hero than everyone who told you these things. The boy's tears had already soaked through Naomasa's shirt, but it was of no consequence. They stayed like that until Izuku was composed again. He pulled back, discreetly wiping his eyes. What did you need to tell me, Tsukauchi? So this is sudden, but Tsuragame has decided on your next training placement. He wants you to get a more holistic view of police work, so he's sending you to a rural station on Monday. We've already gotten permission from your mother, by the way. How rural are we talking? Like, do I need to finish all of my assignments before I go because I won't have internet? Not quite that rural. Besides, they're going to start training you to properly shoot a gun, so please actually sleep, don't stay up all night doing homework. But the area is just rural enough to pack carefully, because you won't be finding any stores close by. Their crime rate is nearly zero, which means you only have a 50% chance of getting involved in villain activity, Tsukauchi said, only half joking. So is there anything special I need to bring? Definitely the fanny pack, but just bring the normal stuff. Izuku raised an eyebrow. So you won't take a stance on the whole don't rape me kit versus the save my fanny pack controversy? I think save my fanny pack is incredibly clever, but I also have a healthy fear of Saito. Fair enough. If that's all you have to tell me about, why don't you fill me in on Detective Kimura? I've only heard stories from Saito and Sasaki, but she didn't seem as intense as they made her out to be. Tsukauchi paused, surreptitiously glancing around his office. It didn't appear that Kimura had bugged the room again in her short time there, but he better choose his words carefully regardless. Kimura is quite possibly Japan's best homicide detective, and unlike me she doesn't have a quirk that helps in investigation. When she officially comes back, you should definitely ask her about her quirk. You'll love it. But I'm getting sidetracked. She already likes you, which is good, because she'll be able to teach you some of the most valuable things you'll ever learn about police work. Just never, and I repeat, never get in between her and Saito during one of their prank wars. They will team up and then we'll never hear from you again. Izuku swallowed, slowly nodding. The two chatted for a while longer, but the boy's news still weighed heavily on the detective. When the boy left, he was smiling again, saying, "I better get home now. We're having Karimi and her mother over for dinner tonight." Naomasa watched him go before lowering his head into his hands. He stayed like that for a few minutes, processing, until he finally picked up his phone. It only rang a few times before the other person picked up. "What can I do for you, Naomasa?" "Toshinori, we need to meet somewhere discreet. I have some important information." "As in, state secret type of information?" Toshinori asked hesitantly. "That would be the type. Let's meet at the school. The only person that might overhear is Nezu." When Tsukauchi left his office walking with a clear purpose, even Mori knew not to question him. To work at their station meant a quiet acceptance that Tsukauchi knew things and people he never talked about. It wasn't very common, but the man was known to rush to random places with little to no warning. It worried his subordinates. They had gleaned a bit of information over the past few years, and it was just enough for them to worry about whether or not the detective would come back alive. Naomasa had similar feelings about Toshinori. He desperately wanted to yell at the man, force him to be at least marginally less reckless. But if he did that, he knew Toshi would simply shut him out, just as he'd done to Gran Torino and Sir Nightai. His friendship with Toshi was one of his most treasured relationships, but it wasn't an easy one. Naomasa internally acknowledged this as he waited at UA's gates for someone to let him in. A few minutes passed, and then none other than the #1 hero walked up, his emaciated face serious. "What is so urgent, Naomasa? What have you found?" The detective ushered Toshi forward. He refused to have this conversation anywhere there was even a chance of being overheard. Toshinori understood the concept of a state secret, but his life consisted of them. Besides, years of being the most powerful had made him somewhat lax, or perhaps overconfident. The hero didn't tell him everything, but it was obvious to the detective that All Might needed to find a successor sooner rather than later. They found themselves in something not dissimilar to an interrogation room. It felt a little odd to sit across from Toshinori in such a setting, but there was no time to dwell on that. "He's back, and he's active," Naomasa said point blank. "The League is almost definitely affiliated with All for One." "What makes you so sure? What have you found?" "We've managed to keep it out of the news, but when your students were at the mall, so was Shigaraki Tamura. Before you ask, no, he didn't target or harm any of them. Instead, he targeted Midoriya Izuku, the boy who took down Stain." Toshinori's hands clenched into fists. "Is the boy all right? What happened?" "Midoriya is fine. He's got immense amounts of luck and intelligence. He actually captured Shigaraki, but the villain escaped from mall custody. I'm more concerned about the fact that Midoriya says that Shigaraki was trying to recruit him, and he even went so far as to offer the boy a quirk." Toshinori gasped. "Do you think the boy would join them?" "He made such an impact in taking down Stain. If the boy joined the League of Villains, public opinion of heroes would take a hit." Naomasa felt an unusual spark of anger at his friend's question. His mind flashed to an injured Midoriya babbling about people telling him he could never be a hero. "I am more likely to join the League of Villains than Midoriya ever would be." "But you need to get serious, Toshinori. Your time as the symbol of peace may not be gone, but it's winding down. You need to find a successor soon enough that you can train them before it's too late." "Naomasa, I trust your instincts. I won't try to tell you who to choose as your successor, but right now, All for One and Shigaraki are doing whatever they please." Naomasa paused, a small smile gracing his face as he thought of Midoriya, the joy and energy that he brought to the station. He knew the kind of life All Might led. He had once seen it as inspiring, but now he saw the overwhelming loneliness his friend had trapped himself in. When you do find that person, Toshi, do me a favor and let them in. I've only realized just how lonely I was, and how much a better person I've become from having someone really close to me. Besides, the chances are that they need you almost as much as you need them.